Choosing to ignore the signs that your child may be suffering from emotional neglect can have some serious consequences down the road. So, what kind of adult are you creating if you decide to bury your head in the sand with this one? For those who don't know me, my name is Danielle C. Baker. I am a registered early childhood educator who specializes in effective value based parenting, helping parents with the realities of what that's like for them as parents. Now, don't get it twisted. When you're working with me, we're putting your child's needs first. So you need to put the ego and the pride aside, and let's get to it. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Talk to Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle C. Baker. And before we get started, be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. And of course, as of season 2, we have something new. And so this episode is brought to you by the Self-Esteem Doctor Online Academy with the wonderful and beautiful Dr. Simone Alicia. I will put the link down below if you're looking for amazing resources and help and training on boosting your child's self-esteem, confidence, and everything else that comes along with it. She's definitely the one to go with, and works with children, teenagers, and even adults. I kind of look through her resources as well. So be sure to keep an eye out for that and go have a look at what she has in terms of resources. So today, tough, tough, tough one again. It kind of piggybacks off of last week's episode. So if you missed that one, be sure to have a look at it. Season 2, episode 7. We were talking about the signs of emotional neglect and how difficult that could be for a parent who is giving their all for their child, all of these sacrifices only to find out that they might actually be causing emotional neglect on the children. So again, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not telling people that they're not doing a good job. What I am saying is we are very unclear on what our role is as a parent. That's been going on for generations, so it's not our fault. Ignorance has a very important part to play in this. And this is why we carry generational trauma. That's all it is. So once you do know, however, then it becomes a choice. If you keep going, if you ignore, then it is a choice. You make that personal decision to keep inflicting emotional neglect on your child. So this is a whole other topic. But today, I am going to talk about what happens if you decide to ignore the fact that your child may be suffering from emotional neglect, whether it's coming from you or somebody else. But I have to tell you that generally it comes from the parent. So what happens if you decide not to do anything about it, if you refuse to accept the fact that you may have a role to play in it? There's a lot of work that you're going to need to do in order to be able to help your child as well. So let's get into it. I'm going to give you some consequences of what happens when you ignore it. So again, I really want to make sure I make it very clear here that I'm not saying that all parents are responsible for this. I'm just saying that a lot of the times we're not aware that we are doing it. So we need to be able to take a step back and see the bigger picture and not just the realities that we are going through. So again, you need to be able to take care of yourself before you can take care of your child. And I can help with that as well. That will be a whole other topic. Now that you do know, it is a choice. So if you don't do anything about it to help your child, because it is part of our role as a parent to help our child, especially when they're suffering, there's a moral obligation there that we need to give them our love and affection and make them feel like they are important to us. We may be doing it and you just assume that everything that we do for them is our way of showing them love and affection, but to them, that might not be what they need from you. And this is where I say we put your child's needs first. So, what happens to your child once they are adults if you choose, because now it's a choice, if you choose to ignore the signs and just go along the routine and just hope somebody else will pick up on it. I'm gonna kind of list 6 different consequences there. Again, they're not specifically for children that suffered from emotional neglect. Of course, you're going to recognize some of the things, but they are definitely there for children that suffer emotional neglect as they grow older without getting any support or help or reassurance. And again, you may get triggered by this because you may recognize some signs in yourself. And there's a good chance that we've all at some point suffered emotional neglect from our parents, because, like I said, this is a generational thing. So take it easy on yourself. Take as much as you can. Don't take it personally. We're trying to fix it. So that's pretty much what we're trying to do. We're breaking the pattern so that our kids don't have to do it for us. Let's look at it that way. It's an investment in the long term. So one of the major consequences once your children are adults, they suffered emotional neglect, is that they can't identify their feelings or emotions. Now that's pretty broad. A lot of us don't know how to process or how to identify our feelings or emotions. But let's just say that they can't manage it in a healthy way. I think everybody will understand that. We can kind of navigate through our feelings and emotions and find a generic name for them, but we may not handle them in a healthy way. So that can create later on some trauma bonds with other people. And we all know what happens from that, so I'm not going to get into that. As number 2, they can't identify their strengths and weaknesses. And that's a major, major, major issue. When, as a person, because I mentioned in the last episode that emotional neglect, one of the direct impact of emotional neglect in children is it creates a disconnection with self-identity. They can't figure out who they are because there's so many conflicting messages that they're receiving from the adults. They can't see themselves where they stand. They know they should feel a certain way, but they don't. They feel like they're being abused, but they're not. It's the self-identity is just shot at that point. And if you keep nurturing that into adulthood, they won't be able to know. They won't know their strengths. They won't know their weaknesses, and it leaves them empty inside. It really does. They feel like an empty shell. They don't know who they are because they didn't get filled with that sustenance of the wonderful human being that they are. So what happens is adulthood then is you're looking for the outside source. They're looking for outside supply. They're looking to fill that void from other people or certain situations. It could fall into substances, habits, but everything is external. They don't look to fill themselves up on the inside. They're looking for it through other people or events or habits. And so that's one way of doing it. Or they will completely shut down. They will completely shut down to the external world and just go into hermit mode. So there's these 2 extremes. And again, it's not specifically related to emotional neglect, but it has a huge play in it. The third one is the lack of overall developmental skills. So we're talking about an entire lifetime of not dealing with the issue. It kind of snowballs exponentially. So in terms of the cognitive development in the child, it is very difficult for them to learn when they're constantly in conflict with themselves or with their events. So it's hard to focus. They will not be able to focus to be able to learn and to develop even further in their cognitive development. There's also the emotional. We said that already. They can't even identify their emotions. They don't know how to handle their emotions in a healthy way. So of course that's going to have an impact in the long term. There's also the social development where they cannot create healthy bonds, positive relationships. They can't trust people. They just, like I said, they can either look towards people to fill the void or completely shut down. So Socially, that doesn't work out very well. They can have difficulty. This is the fourth one: difficulty attaching to the future, seeing ahead, and that's just because of the neglect. They weren't able to get anchored into who they are and where they come from, and who they can embrace. So if they can't even see who they are today, they're not going to be able to see who they are in the future. They're people that cannot make long-term plans. They avoid commitments because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't trust the process. So there's that lack. They create the lack of boundaries, basically. uh, they're just going to go all over the place, and they won't be able to set some healthy boundaries for them to be able to say, okay, this is really not happening. This is not healthy for me. I'm going to stop it there. They may be all over the place, or quite the opposite. Their boundaries are way too strict, and they're not able to open up to the world and the future that's waiting for them. So there's definitely an issue there. They can also have behavioral issues because of these frustrations, these emotions that they can't express. It will just build up and build up into really bad behavioral issues, rage, even anger issues. So it just snowballs as they get older. And the fifth one is, of course, the low self-esteem. Again, it's very broad, but the best way that I can explain this is if we say that the fact that they were not getting the love and affection that they needed, not what the parents thought they needed, but what they actually needed, that builds up, and then they become their worst critic and their worst enemy. Basically, they are always at war with themselves because of it, because they're not lovable. That's what they're thinking. They're not lovable. They're not worthy. They're not worth people's time. People will leave them. People will hurt them because they're not enough. So the self-esteem just gets shot from the beginning, and it gets worse as an adult. Um, it kind of creates a constant battle between how they feel about themselves and how they want to feel about themselves. So if we're looking at thinking positive thoughts, all these things that we keep hearing, seeing people that are very positive, that are very healthy in the way that they manage their emotions, can trigger adults who are victims of emotional neglect as children, because that's something, again, that is not attainable for them. And again, don't forget, they are their worst critics, their worst enemies. So they're going to keep beating themselves up for not being able to reach that. And they're going to start hating the people that are actually doing it. And that's just not a good combination altogether as an adult. I know that some of you have experienced this either yourselves or through relationships that you've had in the past with family, friends, loved ones, partnerships, business. You can definitely identify those issues, and it does boil down to low self-esteem at the end of it. So that's what it is. Uh, because they're so hard on themselves, they're the worst critics, their worst enemy. They will set unattainable standards for themselves. They will expect so much out of themselves that it's just setting them up for failure. So they're really turning into this bad cycle, this really vicious cycle of I'm not good enough, I can't do this, um, I'm the dumbest person. I'm just saying words or this kind of things that are popping up in my head right now. And so they set their bar way too high, and it's the only bar that they can attain. Otherwise, they're a failure. So again, I didn't do it, so of course I'm nothing, and blah blah. So it just snowballs from there. Um, the last one, number 6, is the lack of trust of others, and that's a huge, huge one. Because of the emotional neglect, because they didn't get the love and affection that they needed from their parents growing up, they, if it's not addressed, they will grow up to believe that anybody they come into contact with will eventually hurt them. Even if that's not the case, they're just waiting for that shoe to drop. They're just waiting for that one occasion where the person that they really, really love, or that they really, really want to trust, that they really care for, or they look up to, they're just waiting for them to turn their backs on them and hurt them. And because they're just looking for that, they're actually creating situations that are going to lead up to that so that they can say, you see, I knew it. And then it just snowballs again from that. So we have to see that trust is a very important element in positive emotional attachment. That is a thing. We tend to focus on the negative emotional attachments, the trauma bonds, and all of that. We're looking for what's missing in us, in other people, and of course, that we're going to be disappointed because the people we're looking at, or we're looking for to fill that void, are also dealing with their stuff. So we're setting unattainable standards for those people as well. And so when they show us that they're actually humans and that they have flaws just like us, that's when we feel like we've been betrayed by these people. Even if it's not the case, it's just that's what we build up. And when I say we, I say in general. I'm not saying we're all victims of emotional neglect. I'm just saying, as a child, this is what would happen when you grew up not dealing with those issues or not addressing these issues. So when there's a lack of trust in people at that level, we start building defense mechanisms to protect ourselves from getting hurt, which is absolutely natural. But for victims of emotional neglect, this just goes to the extreme where the walls are way too thick and people can get through, which for them then gives them the validation that, you see, that's what people are anyway. I can't trust them. So very, very heavy consequences if you choose to ignore the fact that your child may be suffering from emotional neglect. This is what you're setting them up for. And yes, you are setting them up for that. There's no other way around it. Your child depends on you for help. You are the sole source of comfort and safety to your child. So if you choose to ignore it and hoping it'll go away by itself, this is the choice that you're making for your child. So how can we help? How can we stop? Where do we start? It's overwhelming. As a parent, we will beat ourselves up for putting our child through this without even knowing it, or we know we're putting our child through it, but we just ourselves where we're at now are not able to handle it, which happens, and that's okay. So what can we do is, if we can start the earlier the better. There's a time period where we go into denial, saying, no, there's no way this is happening. There's no way this is happening with my child. I would kill for my child. I would die for my child. What do you mean I'm causing suffering to my child? That whole part of it, we go on the defensive. We tell people to F off. It's normal. But the earlier you catch it, the earlier you start making adjustments, the better, because then it's not deep rooted in your child. Don't wait for school to take care of it. The schools can't take care of it. It's too late. And they're legally are not responsible for your child in that sense. So it does come back on again. Like I say, parents are the sole source of comfort and safety to children, to their children. Not grandma, not auntie, uncle. I said that in a previous episode. It is you. So if you're looking for the school to do the work for you, it's going to help, but it's not going to help at the core. So start early. The earlier, the better. And just remember that it does take time. You need to deprogram deep subconscious traumas and defense mechanisms and programmings. And this dates back from generation. You had those same traumas and programmings, your parents. So it does take time. You need to be patient. One of the major things, I'll leave you with one little homework that you could do, even if your child doesn't show any signs of emotional neglect. Every child needs it. Every child needs this, is just to highlight that they are important to you, to the world, that they are important, because that's what they feel they're not important, that they don't matter. So highlight every moment instead of focusing on the negative. When you see the signs and the symptoms of what emotional neglect looks like, again, the last episode I kind of listed those. instead of focusing on that, well, why are you so sensitive? Why are you so this? Go back and say, you see how strong you are? You see how you help me? This means a lot to me. This is the kind of conversation you want to have with your child to highlight how important they are. Look, you cleaned up your room. I'm so happy. Thank you. Thank you. Don't say you cleaned up your room, but you left this, and this on the floor still. That's beating them down. So just highlight the positive. It's going to help them. Show them that they're capable of doing things differently. So if you see that they've gotten into this pattern in a negative way, show them once in a while that they are able to do it differently and change their way of thinking. That you trust them, that you trust that they're able to do it. This will change on how they see themselves and how they protect themselves towards others. So those are things that are very, very important. Now, what else? This is the only thing I will leave you with, is highlighting how important they are and how they can do things differently, and that's what makes them special. Always focus on the positive. But I will leave kind of a final note for this today, is that parents tend to forget the most important part of parenting. We get so caught up in everything else. We have our own stuff to deal with, but we do forget, when I say we need to put our child's needs first, we forget the most important part of parenting. We think, okay, we need to get them fed, we need to get them to hockey, we need to get them to soccer, we need to get them to all of this, we need to save money for higher education. What you really need to focus, the most important part to focus on, is showing your love. Not telling them that you can obviously tell them that you love them, but for children, they will only see it once you show it to them through your actions. And so, and not the showing it the way you think you're showing love. It's not your love language here. You need to find out what your child's love language is and give it to them in the way that they need it. So pay attention to your child, be present with your child so that you understand how they receive love from you. And just make your child your priority, no matter what's going on, no matter how chaotic your life could be, no matter what's going through your mind. When you're with your child, be with your child and make sure that you're showing them how important. It seems like a lot sometimes, but it really is a short-term investment, and meaning that just a few short years of you putting in that much more energy, so you don't have to deal with it on the long run for much later, much more intense as they get older. So just focus on the good and help them see the good. If you're focusing on the good, you're teaching them how to look for the good with their struggles. So I will leave you with that. I hope this helped. I'm always available if you want to reach out and ask more questions. I'm there for you. And again, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. And check out the description or comments to get the link for the Self-Esteem Doctor Online Academy. So I hope this did help you. And until next time, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll talk soon.